just started it. It says, yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank
It has started, yeah.
So is it going live or this will be recorded and then shared later? Is it?
Recorded and shared.
Sure. Okay.
So we can wait a little minute or two and see.
We have 9 people online now.
Expecting more. Let me just check.
Elmo, I circulated to all our AE crew colleagues. They should come online, some of them.
Yeah, I saw that email. Yeah. How are things with you, huh?
Get on in, as you could say.
Captain Elmo, are you still going to Singapore?
No. I'm completely retired from aviation.
Okay.
I am now moderator bound and hope to stay like that.
Very good. Okay. Yeah, I haven't been to Singapore for a while. I don't think I'm likely to go for a while. Yeah.
At 71, I asked myself, what the hell am I doing working? Which was a very good question. And I thought, no, enough is enough. I go home. That's it. Yeah.
Elmo, you got Kalyani says hi to you.
Yeah, thank you. Say, pass her the best wishes from me. Yeah.
No, she's here. She's
there. You at home, right? Oh, hello, Kalyani. How are you? So you're still the same, right? Good, very good.
Yes, I'm still the same.
I'm also trying to be the same.
Yeah. We are all trying, but I notice, except for the people from Alliance, all the others are in the old boat. Huh?
What do you mean that?
We are all old people. That's not.
Yeah, I'm 18 plus.
Good.
So how is life there in Singapore?
No, it's in Moratuana. I'm not going.
You are in Moratuana.
No more Singapore. I am only in Moratuana now.
Why?
I'm very happy to be
there.
Yeah. And I think Lahiru's convocation is in January.
I don't think we can
he
go.
Said, "Are you coming, Kelahua?" I didn't give a word.
You can't go. Yeah, we are also waiting to go to Melbourne or to London to see the children, but there's no way to go. I mean, we don't worry about it because you can't. That's it.
Same here.
And anyway, Namini just asked whether she can come next weekend.
With the kids.
So we are of course okay. Because we are not bothered about anything. We have enough air and we are in the hill.
So it's okay. Yeah. Actually, we don't go anywhere unless it's absolutely necessary. We stay at home because you can't take a chance. Why take a chance?
That's correct. Right. Yes, Elmo.
We are not at a correct age to be loafing around, so we have enough things to do at home, and we go to the office in the morning, which is 2 kilometers away. When they are come back in the, that's it.
Elmo, you remember I came to know you in 1972, 49 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. Long time. Huh?
No, Vijay, I knew you even before that because I knew you when you were working for UTA as in the airport staff.
I didn't know that. Yeah,
Why not?
69. That was 69.
Yeah, when I was 69, I was a steward. No, I was working as a steward, and you were working in UTA, right?
Yeah, catering. Yeah.
And there were not many people in the airport those days, no. So people knew each other very well. Yeah.
We knew everybody, yeah, of course, yes.
That would have been 1969, yes.
69, yeah.
So I known you for 50 years.
50 yes, that doesn't make us any younger.
No, definitely not. I'm in touch with Namini.
I know. She tells me, yeah.
Shouldn't we start now?
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready for morning.
Elmo's house is overlooking the Bolgota Lake.
Okay, Vanna, you can now open maybe.
Yes. Okay. So thank you everyone for joining us today on our online literary festival 2020. Very special thanks to Mr. Shehan and Captain Elmo and Harshana. Also thank you, Mr. Vijay for your help. And I hope this will be a great talk, literary talk, and many young authors would be inspired with all these talks. So thank you so much once again, and I would leave our director to say a few words, and then we can start the event. Thank you so much.
So hello to all of you. Thank you to all the participants. I am Française. I'm the director of the Alliance Française de Kandy, and I'm really grateful and happy to receive today in our literary festival Captain Elmo Jayawardena and Mr. Shehan Karunatilaka. Oh my God, I'm sorry. Karunatilaka. I still have issues with Sri Lankan names. I apologize. And thank you very much to Dr. Harshana for being here with us today and to be our moderator. I will have just a few words and tell you that I'm very, very happy to see the members of our committee here that have been helping us so much, and especially Mr. Vijay to organize this event. And I hope indeed that people will be inspired by your examples and your stories. So I will leave the rest to Mr. Harshana to organize the conversation and then the Q&A that will follow. Thank you very much and have a nice time.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thanks for inviting me to moderate this event as well. So very good evening to everyone. Can you hear me clearly?
I can. This is Elmo.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you to the Alliance Française again for organizing this event. And I think it's important that we continue with our literary activity despite all the restrictions the pandemic has brought. And it's good to be chatting online with two people I have known for a fairly long while now. Captain Elmo I know from a very, very long time. And Shehan also, since he published Chinaman, I've known him. And we have done this quite a few times as well. So that for the event today is, I will pose some questions to Captain Elmo and to Shehan. Most of the questions will be common questions to both authors, and you can respond in turn. And we can also see how a conversation may evolve out of that. And at the end of that session, we have some questions from students of the Alliance Française, which will be, I think, presented by Ivana. So we will take about 30, maybe 40 minutes for the discussion, and then we can open it out to the Q&A. As a formality, I will begin with an introduction, though I think most people don't need an introduction to either Captain Elmo Jayawardena or to Shehan Karunatilaka, both of whom are writers. So Captain Elmo Jayawardena is known as a pilot. He has trained pilots for Boeing and Company. He worked for Singapore International Airlines. He was also the chief pilot for Sri Lankan Airlines. He is also the founder president of CandleAid, which began as AFLAC, the Association for Lighting a Candle, but charity, which I know personally does a huge amount of good work in Sri Lanka, utilizing Captain Elmo's very wide international network. From a literary perspective, Captain Elmo really came to light as a writer with Sam's Story, which won the Gratiaen Prize in 2001, which has also been made into a film. Then his next novel, The Last Kingdom of Sinhalay, won the State Literary Prize. And he also published numerous other smaller pieces, and he was awarded the Sahityaratana for a lifetime achievement award for services rendered to literature given by the Sri Lankan state. And his latest publication is Gratiaen, which is a story about a family of crows. It's also, I think, some crows are also called a murder of crows, I think. So it's about a murder of crows. Now, next to introduce Shehan, very briefly, again, I think Shehan requires very little introduction. His debut novel, The Painter, was shortlisted for the Gratiaen Prize in 2000, but he never published it. His second novel, Chinaman, The Legend of Pradeep Matthew, won the Gratiaen Prize in 2009, and perhaps is probably the most awarded book, Sri Lankan book in English. It won the Gratiaen Prize, it won the Commonwealth Book Prize, and it also won the DSC Prize for South Asian Literature as well. Shehan comes from an advertising background. He was born in Galle, grew up in Colombo, and has also spent time in New Zealand. He is also a bass guitarist, as far as I know. And his latest publication is Chats with the Dead. Chinaman was translated into Sinhala as Chinaman Pradeep Matthew Ge Cricket Pravada by Dilip Abesekara in 2015. Okay, so now I'll begin the actual conversation. So the first question that I have to both writers is, since we are kind of addressing a young audience, particularly students who are ranging from maybe 18 to 25, and there might be aspiring writers within this audience, can you just tell us a little bit about how you got into writing in the first place? Because I think the two of you would have taken very different routes into writing, and what inspired you to write and what continues to inspire you today. So perhaps we can start with Captain Elmo.
Okay, I started writing newspaper articles off and on, and I never had a kind of an English education like my good friend Mr. Rambukwella, right? But I mean, we just knew basic English. Why I wrote a novel was for the simple reason I was very interested in history. So I wrote a novel which took me 10 long years to write. And for 10 long years, I was plodding writing this 875-page book. And when I finished it, I went to a publisher, and the publisher looked at it and he read the 875 pages in 5 minutes and said, "This is no good." So I went home and I thought, I must be a fool to have a debut novel which is 875 pages. So I started writing Sam's story, and in 6 months I finished a small story. And then I got it published, and I think I was very lucky that they gave me the Gratiaen Prize for it. Then everyone was asking, "Oh, great, when is your next novel?" I already had the next novel at home, The Last Kingdom of Sinhalay, 875 pages. And that came out. And then that won the State Literary Award. Then I was a novelist. Simple as that.
Okay, perhaps we can then move on to Shehan. I think, Shehan, you actually write professionally as well. So your journey into writing may have been a little different. Would you care to say something about? Your mic is off, Shehan.
Sorry about that. So it wasn't like I intended, even though I did study English because it interested me, I didn't really intend on writing a novel. I mean, I thought perhaps I might write something after I retired or anything, but it wasn't really ambition. The things I wanted to be as a child, as a teenager, were, I mean, as a 10-year-old, I wanted to be a cricketer. And I had a mad obsession with I was a left-arm Chinaman bowler. And then perhaps in adolescence, you mentioned my bass guitar. I don't know if you can see, I'm 45 years old. I'm surrounded by guitars still. So I haven't given up the rock and roll dream. But yeah, I wanted to be a rock star. So I learned guitar and all that. But the strange thing is, I was very lazy at both. I never, with cricket, because I bowled left-arm Chinaman and I had a googly, I thought I was guaranteed in the team. I never practiced. I never practiced my fielding, my batting. And ended up on the reserve bench. With music also, yeah, now I practice. Now I learn about chords and inversions. Those days I just was a punk. But the strange thing was, I wrote. I was compelled to write every day, even though I had no ambitions. That is one thing that I did throughout my 20s when I should have been perhaps practicing or working or if I was serious about being a musician, doing that. But I wrote every day, and it would be just diary entries, ideas for stories, just to basically amuse myself. And so all through my 20s, the two things I did was I read. I mean, that was something from childhood that I just read for pleasure. And then now, of course, you curate it, but I still read daily and write daily. And I did that. And so then in my early 30s, when I had a career in advertising, which I still do, I guess. And that also, I suppose I write for a living, but we can talk about the different types of writing I do. But when it came to my 30s and this idea for Chinaman was there, I felt I'd done the apprenticeship, because the two things you really knew, and I don't know what this audience is, if it's young people who are learning French or who are actually aspiring writers. But I think really the two things you need to do, if you reduce it down, is to read a lot and write a lot. And I felt that I tended to do that so then when it came to write the story, I was ready. So it just, it's quite easy not to write. I think the easiest thing in the world is not to write. A lot of writers tell me this. And so unless you're compelled to do it, it's a tough thing, because it takes 875 pages, you said, that takes a long time, that takes years. And so I guess I was just compelled to do it. And still to this day, if I haven't written or read something, I feel the day has been wasted, no matter what else happens in it. And so I think, so whether, I chose to do it or it's just something that I happened to do. And yeah, now I guess I'm stuck with it.
Thanks, Shehan. I think we just lost Captain Elmo for a bit there. He doesn't seem to be online at the moment.
Yeah, I saw the lights go out. And then...
Yeah, I think there seems to be some issue there. So, Shehan, now what you describe is it's almost like a compulsion in a way for you that you just wrote in your youth. Where do you think that need to write came from? What inspired you? What pushed you to keep doing that? Was it a way of venting, or what drove you to do that?
I mean, I can analyze it and come up with an answer, but I mean, the truth is you don't know. I mean, I look at those diary entries, and yes, sometimes you're venting, sometimes you want to document something. There's different reasons why you do it. But yeah, I don't know. I think all I know is that when I came to my early 30s, I found that writing is, I'd written a few stories by that stage. And I just felt that that was the one thing that I'd done properly out of all the other things that I dabbled in. But I don't know. It wasn't like I sat out and had a message or a worldview that I wanted to impart. I think looking back, you can look back on the work and say it's doing this, that. But I just think when I started it was that the story of Chinaman, to write a story about a mythical cricketer and have a drunk narrate it. It's just the kind of story that I wished I could read. It just seemed like an interesting story. So I think nothing more than that interest. But then, of course, knowing that I think the lessons of my 20s were knowing what it took. Everyone has ideas, but then the craft it takes afterwards to put it together. But yeah, I really don't know. I can't really tell you exactly this thing drove me, but perhaps just the story just seemed interesting. Yeah.
Right. I think you mentioned something very important about reading, that that reading and writing are interconnected, and that you have to read a lot in order to be able to write. Now, one of the questions I had also, we are, I think, roughly about the same age group. So growing up, is maybe the range of stuff that we got to read here was somewhat limited, I felt. Now, as somebody who has studied literature as a profession, etc., I realize that there's a lot more out there. Do you think that even today, in Sri Lanka particularly, even if you read in English, that you're reading enough of a range of different kinds of literature, different kinds of ideas. Because one feeling that I got is in Sri Lanka, having judged prizes, etc., is that we have a sort of a safe set of topics that a lot of people handle, and that there's not maybe enough creativity, innovation in what our writers do. Do you want to comment on that?
I mean, I don't think there's an excuse for saying there's not access to literature now. I mean, when we were growing up, yeah, you had the bookshops, the KVG's bookshop that I used to go to at Liberty Plaza, not standing anymore. And yeah, so you were limited, and this was pre-internet time, obviously. Now, I mean, I don't think there's a problem in access to information and so on, and to literary traditions and so on. But the difference I will say is, when I was growing up, you wouldn't find many Sri Lankan books in the shops on the shelf. Right. You might see Colin De Silva's Winds of Sinhalay. Those were like, I think, epic bestsellers at the time. You might see a few sort of self-published things. Now there is a shelf. Like now there is a proper, the proper shelf space, and perhaps even a section for Sri Lankan writing. And I would certainly say you can track that from the inception of the Gratiaen Prize and Karl Muller's Jam Fruit Tree. And after that, there was a lot of Sri Lankan writing. So one thing was, that's the difference I see between that time and this time, that now, I mean, you can debate the quality of the Sri Lankan writing. Is it all good? Is it all? But there is abundance of it in English. But access to, I mean, the go-to topics, I think that's a shortcoming of writers, because this country is an absurd country filled with bizarre stories. There's no doubting that. I'm sure you grab today's Sunday papers, there's probably at least 2 or 3 short stories in that. So if you're seeing a lack of inspiration or lack of imagination, I think that's really, I don't know if you can blame it on access, because we have access to the information, even to literary traditions, and we have fine university degrees where this is, and I don't think lack of literacy would be a problem with the English speaking crowd. So so why writers are writing about certain topics, I mean, that's a bigger question, which perhaps the writers don't even know. But I think, I mean, definitely there has been an expanse if we're tracking the last 30 years or so. Yeah. Have we lost Captain permanently?
Okay, thanks.
Ivana.
Yeah, it seems to be a problem. Could somebody from the organizing committee try and reach Captain Elmo and see what's happening? Because
we have. I sent you a little message. I don't know if you got it. But there was a power cut at Captain Elmo's place. But
I see. All right.
Time for him to start the generator, and he will be back.
Okay. Great. Okay, great. Yeah, I was getting a bit worried that this will turn into a dialogue between me and Shehan. So. Okay, I'll move on to the next question, partly also because I think when Alliance Française contacted me, they said one of the intended audiences was young people who are learning French, and presumably, and that's how I sort of set up the questions as well. So now, as a trustee of the Gratiaen Trust, and also having judged quite a few prizes, over the years, one constant kind of complaint that keeps coming up is the relative lack of editing in Sri Lankan writing, in English particularly. People seem to think that first drafts are good enough. But I think what Uncle Elmo said earlier about the 865-page book that later became the Last Kingdom of Sinhalay, and Shehan's own experiences. Writing is a long process, right? And editing, feedback, all of this are very, very vital to that process. So is that something that you would like to talk about, Shehan, about writing as a process and what it takes to produce something good?
So editing is an essential part of it. Like, there is no escaping that. And I mean, I started to think of people who think their first drafts, because my first drafts are really terrible. And that over years, you grow to accept that. And you have to sort of write holding your nose and kind of looking forward, not looking. And so the first draft is supposed to be that. But I mean, okay, the feedback thing is interesting. So because I think initially when you are, welcome back, Captain. Well,
thank you.
So I think initially, I'm reducing the whole process, but okay, having the idea is I would say the easy part. Everyone has ideas. Everyone has ideas for screenplays, novels, video games, whatever. But then the worst thing you can do is tell people about your idea. I think because that is or write like 20 pages and then show someone and then is not the time for feedback. If you have an idea, nurture it, research it, whatever, and write that first draft. But you have to write that first draft, perhaps not knowing where you're going to end up, also not knowing if you're going to go on the wrong track, but you write it. But of course, that is only that's the hardest part for me. The first chapter, the first sentence, the first paragraph, getting the tone. After that, getting to the end, you do it. But then the editing is the essential part, because then, okay, firstly, self-editing, you go through it and you think, okay, what was I thinking? This part doesn't make sense. And you obviously make sense of it. And that is not just one. I do it many times, because you write something, you leave it for a couple of weeks, come back, and it doesn't make any sense, so on. But then, yeah, the editing, giving it after you have finished it, then you give it to other people. And maybe in publishing, maybe... you have to select your people carefully, preferably not someone you're in a relationship with or someone who loves you or your mom. You'll get whatever comments you get, but those aren't useful comments. You need someone who is, this is a complex question. Maybe even not even a friend, but someone who will be straight with you. But yeah, I think that feedback process is essential. And then, then you spend, so on average, if I look at, so I write advertising. These days, advertising business has changed. Now it's all sort of apps and websites and social media engagement and all that, but it's still marketing. But the same process, I'll spend, if I have a month, I'll spend 2 weeks researching, absorbing the brief, doing all that, maybe 1 week of writing and 1 week of editing. That would be that's the ideal. What usually happens is 3 weeks of research, 2 weeks of this, and then you ask for extension and you edit for 2 weeks. But what I'm saying is the editing process is as much part of the first process. So yeah, I don't think it's possible to divorce. So that is just internally. But then once you give it to a publisher, that's a whole different level, because that person is not taking your story and looking from a marketing lens, looking, okay, what can... And so now, for instance, Chinaman went through numerous edits. It got cut by about 150 words. This one, I'm still editing it now. I'm doing an edit for the UK market, which is, so it never stops. But I think it's, because I know a truth, and I think all the writers know the truth, is that it keeps getting better. Each edit you do, each time you revise it, it gets better, it gets tighter, it gets more precise. So I'm happy to keep editing. I've written 2 books in 10 years, so perhaps I can get faster, but I think, you can't avoid that process. Even if you can, there is that feeling of satisfaction when you finish the draft. Let me send it to the printer, let the word see it. But no, I think spend another year and edit it. It's essential.
Yeah.
I don't know what
I think that's really good
on editing is.
Yeah. I think that's really good advice, Shehan, for young writers as well, because today the problem is there are multiple channels where you can get things out very quickly because we live in the social media age. So I think taking that time back, taking a step back and seeing the process through is very important. Captain Elmo, good to have you back.
Yes.
We missed one part of the conversation with you, so I'll just backtrack a little bit.
No problem.
Now, you talked about how you got into writing. But perhaps can you tell us what inspired you to write Sam's story in the first place? What kind of set off that spark? What
you see, it's a different story. I did not write Sam's story as my first book. Right. I wrote The Last Kingdom of Sinhalay because I went to Mauritius and saw a grave. I went looking for a grave of a Halapola. When I saw that, I realized I had no idea about my own country's history. So that made me think, hey, there are so many thousands and thousands of people like me with 2,500 years of written history. I hardly know anything. I only know Hashapabil, Sikiriya, Dutugam Nukil, Elara, things like that. So I started studying history and I thought, hey, I might as well write a story on this. You know what I mean? So I wrote. For 10 years I wrote. So I became quite familiar with history. And then as for Sam's story, I needed a very short, small book. And Sam was living in my house and watering the garden. So I wrote about him. though it was my second story. So I had already spent 10 years as a budding writer writing Last Kingdom of Sinhalay. So that is how my writing came into that.
Okay, so I'll move now to the question to which Shehan was responding just as you rejoined the call. Asked him was about the editorial on your writing, because I think our conversation watched by and today also, given the fact that there are very easy ways of getting things out, social media, etc. You don't have to.
You're coming in broken to me. I don't know how.
Yeah, Harshana, it's really breaking up.
Maybe 20 years ago, getting a book. So can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, yeah. So basically I talk about how important the editorial process is to writing.
That is a very good, that's a very good one. I agree totally with Shehan, whatever he said, except one point. He said you must get it edited not by somebody who's close to you. Now I've been married 45 years and my editing is first done by my wife, and she doesn't hesitate a moment to tell me to go to hell. So that is also important. If I go to a friend, they'll say, I say this is good. But as far as my wife is concerned, she tell me, what nonsense have you written? So that is the only thing I disagree with Shehan on. Rest of it is 100% right. We cannot become authors by not having editors. You can't take a bow and arrow and hit the thing first side onto the bullseye. There's no way you can do that. You might be touching the target. So first you must write. And the editing, in my opinion, comes in 3 different sections. One is spelling editing. Now, I can't spell to save my life, but thank God the computers do the spelling for me. So I got no problem with that. And even the grammar. But still, I need a grammar editor first. The English editor, pure English editor, and I don't want any of his ideas about the book. So he just does a grammar editing. Then I want a editor, a wordplay editing. That means the sentence is not so nice, not the total idea. Sentence is not so nice. Can you change it? Would you like a suggestion? That's the second editor. Then the third editor is the one who looks at the whole thing and says, this chapter doesn't suit, or you haven't started and explained what you wanted to do. I go through 3 editors because I think without them, I'm lost. And my first advice to anybody is, you must get it edited. The more times you get it edited, that's better for the book. Only thing is, don't be governed by the editor. That is another thing. It is my book. I'm writing my thoughts. If I ask you, Harshana, you might give me another thought, but I may not agree with it. Right? So I have the choice to either accept you or not. Right? When you come with the idea part of it, right? And once you get that through, I think first question is, you need editing. The more you read, like Shehan said, the more you read, every time you read, the book gets better. 100% right. You got to keep reading. You got to keep reading, right? And it will get better. But one day you will think, no, this is enough. I'm not going to read anymore. And that's it. So editing is paramount in an author. You must get it edited and you must be able to take correction. When somebody says something, you must look at it very practically and see, because it's very difficult for us to criticize ourselves when we write. You agree with me, Shehan?
Very much so. Those are two very good points. Yes, you need to get the outside views and all that, but in the end, it's your book. your name is going on it. If someone hates it, they are going to blame you, not all the other people who edited. So that is the ultimate thing. You can take the criticism, but you understand what it needs to be done. When people tell you something is boring or something doesn't work, they are probably right. But then if they tell you, you need to do this, that may not be the way. You might know how to fix it. So ultimately you have to do that. And sorry, I lost my train of thought. Well, you made your last point was what? Sorry.
My last point was three kinds of editing. One is the person who just comes and gives you a T's, and all those things, right? They're also important because you may miss such things. Spelling mistakes.
Yeah, so now I got it. The structural editing. That's a crucial thing. So now we have people who can make sure your commas are in the right place, something's expressed. But that structure, knowing, okay, your book is about this. These two chapters actually are not about the thing that it is. Those are complex things. And so what I find is a lot of people now give me and friends usually, give me their work, say, can you critique it? And I critique it. And the better writers, the good ones will sit there and listen and take notes. The other ones tend to defend, say, no, I put that in for this reason. No, anyway, I meant that here. That was, and you're like, okay, fine. You can defend it, but that's not the point. The point is, like you say, you have to shut up and listen and just hear what the reader is saying. And then you have to kind of leave the ego aside, because, I mean, later you may not take that on board. That is a different question. But you should listen. If you're trying to defend the work, then of course there's no more editing to happen. But yeah, the fact that the book is an evolving process, and even if you're writing a feature article, even if you're writing a short story, a poem, it's the same process, maybe on a different scale than if you're writing an epic 800-page historical piece or short story. But I think the principle is the same. Initial idea, do it, but then keep crafting, taking the outside world. But ultimately, it's yours. Your name goes on it, so you decide. This bit, it's okay. If some people get it, some people don't, it's okay. This is how it has to be. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think what both of you raise is very important about the editorial process. I think my internet is again a little... Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, I'll hear loud and clear.
Okay, good. So yeah, I think what both of you said about the editorial process and the ability to take feedback is very, very critical. And I think not just to the young people, but to writers as a whole in Sri Lanka, another issue that I have observed is that we really lack a good review culture in Sri Lanka. We don't have good reviews of books published, etc. There are very few people who can do that properly, and very few people who do it properly as well. A lot of the stuff tends to be a friend writing about a book or something, but if we really want to uplift our writing, we need that kind of critical response. And writers should also not be defensive. They should be able to take on board that critique. But like Shehan said, you don't lose your soul because you took on critique. You know what you want to do, but you take what you want from that critique and then use it. So I'll move on to...
Also, I think it's such a small scene and such a small place that this is the problem. I mean, if you're doing theater review, you know everyone in that play. If you're into theater, maybe you acted with them and all that. So, it's a bit of a small town. It's not like you can write an honest, scathing review like them. And if you do write a scathing review, that's going to spark off. So there are all these kind of things which I think comes from having a small literary scene. Yeah. I mean, I know I don't do reviews. I mean, I might privately review something, but
True.
That also.
I mean, I think that's a very valid point, that it is particularly English writing is a really small crowd and everybody knows each other, and that creates its own problems. But having said that, I think if you go back to the 1980s and even to the 90s, we had some really good people who could review in the newspapers. That is not the case anymore. Ajit Samaranayaka, for instance, was extremely well read and could do a really good review of a book. We don't really have many people like that anymore.
I have a point to share on that, Harshana.
Yes.
Now, a lot of people ask me, can you write a review on my book? Right. Now, I look at it in a different way. Now, there is a new author, especially new authors, they have written a book. Now, they tell me, can you review this? I tell them, I am not a literary critic. I have no background to claim anything like that. I am a literary appreciator. For example, when I read Chinaman, I thought, Jesus Christ, this guy is very good. I'm appreciating. I didn't look for any mistake in Shehan's book. So I was an appreciator. Now, a new author who may not have a book in the same class as Chinaman, who is just barely there, got it published, that also has certain amount of facts that can be appreciated in that book. By my appreciating, I'm not saying about kadayana business, but appreciating what that person has written, I am in my own way, I'm thinking, I'm encouraging that person to write more. I remember one school teacher, retired, sent me a book about her village or something. And I found things that were nice about it. And I wrote that. And she was very happy about it. Maybe she wrote another book, I don't know. So I look at it from a literary appreciating point of view. At the same time, I wrote a review on another very powerful man's book, and he got angry with me. Right? I said, come on, man. Because he was used to everybody saying yes to him. So he didn't want some bloody pilot coming and criticizing his writing. I didn't even criticize. I only said, hey, something is wrong here, right? That's about all. So I look at
it can be dangerous business, this reviewing thing.
Exactly.
It can be.
So what I do is I try to say I'm a literary appreciator. So I will appreciate what you have written and write that, that's about all.
No, that's a great, encouragement is obviously you don't want to stomp on someone's dreams. And we know, I don't like to review a critic because I know it takes, even to write a bad book, it takes you a year. Even to write a year. So even if you read a bad book, you think, okay, that poor guy probably slaved for 2 years and, so who am I to, so I have that kind of empathy. But I suppose if you want to elevate standards, then you need to have this. And I suppose that's what the Western world has. They have these gatekeepers. So to get into a publishing house, there is a criteria where someone will pick, and then someone will market it and so on. And therefore, and also it's got to get through the critics who are very separate from the publishing. And so this is supposed to be this filtering system. So it's necessary. But I feel that when some people give me manuscripts, so that happens a lot, and I'm happy to appreciate that. But I'm a bit more savage with them. In the sense, I am quite honest. If something's not working, I tell them, because I think no one needs to waste their time. When I was young also, I wrote some crap and some people said it was good and I thought it was good. I don't think that's useful for anyone. It's more useful to, you've got to be polite. You don't insult people, but just say, I'm sorry, this thing, it just didn't make any sense to me, and be very candid. If the writer can't take it and that person falls out with you, then they're not destined to be a writer. Working in advertising, you take 3 ideas to the client, which you spent a month crafting, they will stomp on each one and you have to go back and do 3 more. That's part and parcel of it. So I've developed a thick skin over the years. And I think to be a writer, as you know, your 800 word epic page epic gets rejected. You have to take that. I think most people will be like, okay, this writing thing is not for me, I'll do something else. But real writers, you feel bad, but you keep going, you will do it again. So when I get advice, I do try to encourage, obviously, but if it's not working, I do. And I think as a result, people don't send it to me twice, I think, which is also a good screening. Yeah.
One time I had a couple doing editing for me, whatever I wrote, and I used to call them the Brutals, right? That was the name, Mr. Brutal and Mrs. Brutal. I can say that at the moment, Shehan, you and I are being moderated by Mr. Brutal. So, this is a good subject.
Brutal couple, yeah.
Brutals, yes.
Brutal is what you need. If you want quality, it doesn't get by giving people pats on the back. And really, writing, for me, you can measure it in sales or in prizes and all that. For me, the measurement is if a complete stranger picks up your book in say a foreign airport, doesn't know anything about you and has an experience, and it could be entertaining experience, learns something, has an enjoyable experience, that's the success. And to do that, that takes skill and craft and everything, but that is the measure. Everything else is, you can say, someone gives you a good review, maybe, you know, they know you, or there's all these politics involved. Prizes also, I mean, we know, I mean,
yeah,
good stuff wins prizes, mediocre stuff wins prizes, great stuff doesn't win prizes. So these are all flawed metrics. Ultimately, that is it. You put something on the page that in 5 years' time, someone picks it up in Bulgaria and opens it, they should be able to have experience. That's really, and few of us, it's a very hard thing to do. Few of us can do something of that quality, but that's, I think, really the game that everyone should be aiming at. Everything else is down to marketing and chance.
Yes.
Yeah, we were talking about literary critics. We are missing the people of stage of Reggie Sirvadana, Nihal Ratnayaka, and we have never had people of that standing after they were gone.
No doubt, definitely, yeah. I think, I mean, some really very good ideas came out, and I mean, I'm not a creative writer, but I also publish academically, and the process is not very different. Again, it has to go through a very rigorous, we have something called peer review. No academic publisher will take your book if it's not been through peer review. But the problem again in Sri Lanka is that there is no such system. So you get a lot of stuff that's published, which is supposedly academic, but you know, it's just people's opinions. They have not been verified. They have not been quality checked. So we are kind of running short on time as well. So I'll move on to a couple of the other questions that I wanted to ask you all. Now, one question, I've shared this with Shehan and Captain Elmo previously as well. I consider both writers kind of what I would call comic writers. Comic, not necessarily in terms of humor, though they do use a lot of humor in their writing, both of them, but comic in the sense that they see something redeeming about life in Sri Lanka, that at the end of the day, though they write about fairly difficult issues in Sri Lanka, conflict, murder. I mean, Shehan's latest book is about killing, disappearances, the lack of justice, etc. And even Chinaman had a very dark undertone. Sam's story was about an intellectually challenged man and how he tries to understand this, you know, central conflict that has defined this country for so long. But at the end of the day, there is some redemption, there is some hope. The books don't end necessarily on a dark note. So can you tell us about this, what I would call a comic vision about life? Do you agree with my view, or what are your views? Either Shehan or Captain Elmo, both of you can respond.
Shehan, let Shehan go first.
Really, I was on mute. I was going to say the same to you. Well, like I said before, so firstly, I don't think you set out to say this is my worldview and I want to share it with the world and I want to disseminate it in a book. I don't think that, maybe some people write that way, but generally not so. I think you write the story, you write the character, the situation. But ultimately, yeah, your worldview does see. And so when I think in another question you brought up the point WG and Mali, very similar kind of this. Yeah, there's humor to it. There's a lot of nihilism, a lot of darkness to it, but there's hope. So perhaps it's my own worldview. And my worldview or my view of Sri Lanka is, it is certainly an absurd place. Like that absurdity is, I mean, we can look in today's papers, like I said, but just a cat with heroin around its neck was caught outside a prison. A convicted murderer on death row is voted in a landslide. You know, these are things that you find in comic novels, but these are things that come, and I've just these two examples. I can go back, you certainly know, I can go back last 10 years, last 20 years and extract that. And also, I mean, okay, apart from the absurdity, there's been obviously a lot of horror that's happened over the last 30 years of civil war. And the thing is, we look at places like South Sudan or I guess now Eritrea, and we say, wow, these places look horrible, such brutal places. That's probably how the world saw Sri Lanka in the 80s and 90s, that these people are doing these barbaric things and this horror are happening. But yet, Sri Lanka is not a grim, dour, dark place. It's actually quite a cheerful, happy place. And even whilst, even now in the midst of a pandemic, we have a government, we don't know what the government is doing, that things are happening, and that still there are internet jokes, there are memes, there are, everything is like, and they're very quick doing it. And I feel that perhaps this is not a Sri Lankan thing, but it's very much pronounced here that we're used to absurdity. We're used to terrible things happening. And then we're used to wonderful things happening, but we somehow see the humor in it. And so I think with both books, that's sort of what comes. And it doesn't shy away from the fact that a lot of grim things are happening. But it is sort of, in the first book, Chinaman, while a war is raging, two men are just drinking arak and watching cricket, which, let's face it, a lot of us in Colombo, this is what we ended up doing because there was nothing we could do about things that were beyond our control. And so there is that tendency to, despite all this absurdity, to see a comic view of it. So I think that's a very Sri Lankan thing. And so I don't try and edit it out. It comes out that way, but I feel that it is true to the Sri Lankan character as well. But it's not a Sri Lankan thing either, absurdity. I mean, just look at the United States. I just think, I mean, I don't need to say much. Look at the last 4 years. If you need to be convinced that there is absurdity in this world, it's so. I think this is my worldview of the human, and also there's humor in it. So you can talk about dark things, but still not write a depressing book. So yeah, that's my approach to it.
Captain Elmo?
Yeah, the important thing is that now Sri Lanka, you know that we Sri Lankans find humor in the worst situations, right? That is for sure. Now, when I was doing major part of my writing, I was living in Singapore. Now, that is clinically clean, right? Sometimes it's too clean, but what happens is, it is the disorder that makes stories. Now, in Sri Lanka, if I go and cut my hair, I have my old barbers in Moratuwa, I had to only listen to what they're talking around. And then I have a story to come back and write. If I just walk on the road, if I go in the car, I don't get it. But if I walk on the road, I'll meet some old schoolmate, right? Everything has a strain of humor in it, if you really look at it. So I am always looking for a laugh in life. So in the meantime, when I write also, these things come. Now in Sam's story, there was a man, really a man called Bilinkadja, right? Because he was a hemp product. He was a man who became a woman and he was selling hoppers, right? But he was called Bilinkadja. So you know what I mean? What kind of humor there? I never created that. It was already there. So I could only pick it up and put it down on a paper, and it's a fantastic thing. And people have asked me also, how did you create this? I said, no, I never created it. This bugger was called that, and he was selling hoppers in my hometown. So there's a lot of humor. Even anything that anything that happens, you can see what these clips and all these things that come, they're full of humor. We are very humorous people because we have been born in a beautiful place. There are no two words about it. This is paradise, I can tell you. Of course, there's only one little lake that is bad. This is called Jayawardena. Other than that, everything is beautiful, right? So we have to look at the beautiful side, the humorous side, everything is there. So as far as I'm concerned, I like to laugh when I write a book. Of course, I didn't have anything written like that in Last Kingdom of Sinhalay because it's a historical novel. And I can't tell that crows were cracking jokes when I write about the crows. But whenever I can, I try to bring in that humorous way of looking at a thing. Because I think it's valid to all of us because we are looking for a laugh. We're looking for a laugh all the time. And to really know that you must live. Now, Shehan had lived in Singapore also. No, you crack a joke, the guy will look at you and the ball will go right over his head. So there is no punchline even. So that is quite normal there.
So, Captain Elmo, have you written about Singapore?
No. I haven't.
Never.
Never, not even
one. But I really struggled. To... and you're right. I think you need a bit of dirt. Traditionally also, if you look at the literatures in the Londons and the Paris and New York, it comes out of the dirty side of town, right? The clean side, cleanliness is bad for good writing, I guess, because Singapore, the writers there's a lot of state funding because the state wants to manufacture culture, like they have manufactured everything. They want to manufacture culture, so they throw money at it. But I'm not sure it works that way. You get a grant, whether you're going to, maybe if you're starving, you're going to write a better story than if you're sitting, I don't know. But for some reason, I also attempted to write about Singapore, but then also second thing is you're scared. If you write about that place, they may not.
You might lose your job.
You might never be allowed to go back there. Yeah.
So I didn't, but I agree totally with these points.
No, we are in a place where there are stories. No, I mean, any given day, the whole newspaper is full of stories, no? Whatever it is, and it depends on how you look at it, but there are fantastic stories, sad stories. I mean, recently I was working with a person who needed a kidney transplant, and ordinary people, they don't have much money. So the kidney was given by another person. And I asked, is this a relation or something? No relation, just a friend. Oh, I see. I want to talk to this friend. I called the friend, this lady, and said, can you tell me why are you giving your kidney? You're about 29 years old to somebody. No, because it's okay. He said, in case I'm married also to a blind person. Right? I mean, we have such people in this country, you know. So I can write a story about that. Of course, they don't want it written, but what a beautiful, kind way of generosity expressed by giving a kidney is like that. So there's so many stories here like that.
Okay, I think, I mean, the conversation is really interesting, and I actually do have a few more questions, but I think maybe we'll now ask Ivana to pose the questions that were asked by the students. Otherwise, we might run out of time. We have two wonderful storytellers who will talk into the night. I think if you allow them.
There's about 10 questions, I think. So Ivana, why don't you pick the ones we have time for? Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Harshana. Well, actually, I think most of the questions are here were asked by Harshana. I think it's the same questions. So I'm not going to repeat them. I'll just pick like two or something and I'll just ask him, sorry. Okay, I'll ask a question and you both can reply. It's the same. What was your hardest chapter to write?
Captain, you want to go first?
First and the last one.
in between goes smoothly. Okay.
Beginnings and endings. Yeah. No, for sure. I would say, the first sentence, the first paragraph, the first chapter is, even if I'm writing a feature article, I will take maybe 8-9 days to write the first paragraph. And then 3 hours later, the article is finished. 3 hours later, 2,000 words is done, but I'll take 8 days for that first. And I think this is common. I notice a lot of writers suffer from this. So yeah, the first is always the toughest. Once you set the tone and you kind of, if you write the chapter well, then in that is the seeds of the rest of the story, it's fine. But yeah, first, last, of course, yeah, I don't know. I usually know the ending about midway. But yeah, I can imagine if you get to the ending and you don't know what's going to happen, that's going to be also a problem.
It was the ending, which is hard.
Yeah, I don't know. Different things for different people, but usually there can only be one ending. If you've written it properly, there can only be one ending, and that's it. Yeah, but yeah, beginnings are hard.
It's the incipit that's hard, isn't it? It's the incipit that's hard.
All right. The second question: what comes first, the plot or the characters?
You asked this from Shehan first. One for him, one for me.
I think no rule as such. Sometimes you might see someone on the street like, I'm going to mispronounce the name, so I'm not going to say the BK, but you might meet a character and you might decide to write about that, or you might have an idea. But for me, it doesn't exist till there's a voice. Like until there is a voice, otherwise it's just ideas. You know, what if that one got hit by a bus? You know, then it's just you're just playing with ideas. But when you have a voice for the piece, and it doesn't need to be a first person, third person, like a cat, that's when I think you're compelled to write it. But other than that, yeah, sometimes you get characters, sometimes plots. It varies, I think. Yeah.
Okay, if you ask me, young lady, I think I have to make a correction on the word you use, because a lot of book writing does not have a plot but a theme. You know, plot. When you say plot, it is somebody killed somebody and how the police came and that kind of a plot. But what you're looking for is a theme. Now, I wrote a book about crows, so they didn't have any plot, but they had a theme of life. You know, so that is what I look at normally, but I don't have a plot before I write.
Okay, and how did publishing your first book change your process of writing?
What do you ask?
Sorry, you cut out there.
All right. How did publishing your first book change your process of writing?
That's yours, Captain?
Is mine. Okay. When I got it published, I was very happy. I can tell you, I was so happy to look at that book in my hand. My God, I have written a book. And it did not change anything. It only changed when I went to a big hall and then they announced that I had won the Gratiaen. You know, I nudged my wife and said, you know, that is me. I got a prize, right? That made me feel like an author. That means I can write. You know, it's a great feeling. That's all I can say. Very, very great feeling.
All right. How?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it changes the process. I think the process is the same. You can't shortcut the process. You developed your process, and it's. I suppose publishing it meant that I had to write a second one, and I didn't have an intention of writing a second one when I wrote the first one. But publishing it meant that then the next time you meet someone, they're saying, "What are you working on now? When is your next book out?" So that was the only reality. But in terms of process, it's still hard work, and you need to wake up very early in the morning and read a lot and meditate and stay sane and stay patient. It's still the same game. I don't think the process gets, and sadly, I've spoken to some very great writers who are like on their 7th, 8th book, and I don't think it gets easier. I think just because you've written one, yeah, it's still, if anything, it's the same or slightly harder, I suppose.
Okay. And what do you think makes a good story?
Shehan, you pointed to him.
Story. So I think I mentioned this before. A complete stranger. If you can use the time of a complete stranger and they get something of value from it. I think that's, I mean, you can say a good story must have a great plot, but that's not true. Like Captain Elmo says, there have been many great pieces of work. Not much happens, but somehow the theme or the sense of place or the voice captivates you. So I would say, yeah, you can reduce it to great character, these bullet points. But I think generally, if you have an engaging experience, and that doesn't mean it has to be highbrow, it can be just a so-called cheap thriller, but if it engages you and offers you some escape, all of those things. So I think that's, yeah, you can't really define it as one factor or this.
Yes.
How about it for you, Mr. Elmo?
What was the question? I'm too old. I have Alzheimer's.
That started a long time ago, huh?
Let me ask you the question again.
Yeah.
What do you think makes a good story?
Oh, now I have to talk about my experience. Now, I had a great story to write about the history of Sri Lanka. You know, the story was there. So that was fine. Then Sam's story was also there. The poverty has been in Sri Lanka all the time. So the whole poor stories are there. The one time that I wrote something that wasn't there for me to understand easily was writing about crows. So that becomes kind of a creative writing where you can think anything, and as long as it is matched in the other chapters. And then I wrote about a train journey that these crows did by sitting on a train. So that is all imagination, So it changes with what you're writing, It always changes with what you're writing.
Harshana, I think there is an audio. I think there's someone who wants to ask a question from the audience. With your permission,
Hello?
Harshana? Yes?
Hello?
So, yeah, please. Yeah, of course.
Um,
Go ahead.
Jessica, you can ask your question. Unmute yourself, please.
Thank you. When did you realize that you want to be a writer?
When did I realize? I never wanted to be a writer. I just wrote. I just wanted to write a story, and then it's very difficult. I wanted to write a historical story to study history, but subsequently I really wanted to write. So I wrote books and articles and things like that. But when I was young, I had so many problems on my head. The last thing I dreamt was being a writer or being a pilot, for that matter. So no, I didn't have that idea at all. No.
No, that's a very good answer. You don't dream of being a writer, you just write. And I think one thing that attracts me to it is like if I want to be a film director, I have to learn how to use a camera, learn lighting, then get actors, if I want to form a band, I need to find a drummer. And there's all this. Writing is the one thing where it's just you and, back in the day, I still write with like a pencil and a paper. And I don't use a typewriter. I have one, but it's the one thing. It's all you. You can't blame it on anyone else. You write a screenplay, the director does a bad job. There's all this. This is all you. If it's bad, it's you. So there's that. But yeah, there's no one point you say you want to do. In the end, you write, and suddenly you realize during the Gratiaen Prize deadline of December, you realize, oh, there's a Gratiaen Prize deadline. Do I have something? And you put something together, perhaps. Maybe that happens. That happened to me many times. But I think, yeah, you just write it, then you accumulate enough writings, and then if you think it's good enough to pursue, you do it. But yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jessica. And our director, Frederick, has some questions as well. So.
Yes, so thank you very much for all the answers you gave already. It's very, very interesting. I just have a question that might be a bit weird. I would like to know what would be for you the key defining word or the key defining word for what makes today's Sri Lankan literature. I would say, for example, that today's French literature would be defined by cynicism and selfishness. Basically, these are the main themes you would find there. So what would be the keywords to define nowadays Sri Lankan literature?
No, we have a professor on the panel who is much more qualified than either of us to answer that question, I think. Let's hand it over to the expert.
That was very clever of you, Shehan. Well, it's a difficult question to answer, and I don't really want to put myself up there, because one is where, on the one hand, we have the Sri Lankan writing in English, and then we have Sinhala writing, and we have Tamil writing. So I can't really give one conception, because these three communities have had very different histories, very different experiences in the country. Not that there aren't commonalities, there are of course commonalities, but they have also been for who they are, they write. So if you look at Tamil literature, for instance, it's defined by the conflict. Most of the serious Tamil writers can't escape that, because that has been very much a part of their life. If you look at the Sinhala writing, that becomes a very different, again, from writer to writer. But I think, again, in some ways, cynicism would be a good way to describe some of the Sinhala writing that's coming out, because actually, unlike a lot of the English writing, you don't get that sense of hope in a lot of the Sinhala writing. You get the sense of real, that we are in crisis, that we are in perpetual crisis as a society. If you look at a number of the serious Sinhala writers who have written. And English writing, I think it's interesting. I'd hesitate to describe it, but if you take three big writers, so Karl Mahler, Shehan himself, and Captain Elmo, there is this sense of something redemptive about Sri Lanka, and that is that even despite all the problems it goes through, you get that sense. So I'm probably not answering the question very well, but I really hesitate to give like an overall answer. It's
a good question. It's a challenging question to reduce it to one word or two words. But what Harshana said, I mean, the fact that you had to refer to 3 different literatures, that is in itself telling for me that we don't have Sri Lankan literature. We have these 3 silos which are completely almost oblivious to each other. And I think now, Frederick, you didn't describe it as French, North African literature, French Algerian literature, French Canadian literature. It's French literature, right? But for us, because obviously the mechanics of having 3 languages, and but we don't have that sense. We have 3 separate literatures. So that was, I always say this, that there should be more work being put into translation. So we are reading each other's literatures and learning from it. But yeah, we do have 3 different literatures, but yeah. I mean, I don't know what the one word is.
I have the answer.
Diversity, I don't know. Yeah.
I have an answer in 2 words. Now, what I would like to say is literature depends on everyday talk of the average people, everyday talk, right? So the everyday talk of the average people, if that is literature, there is only 2 words, politics and politicians. That is the way I would define it. I'm serious, and I am serious.
You are spot on there, Elmo. You are spot on.
Thank you. I'm very pleased with the answers. It's really interesting to get all these answers from you. It's very nice. Thank you.
And we have one last question to Mr. Shehan. And is he there?
Yeah.
Mr. Shehan is there. All right. Can you please say a few words about the movie 800 and how you feel about the movie getting banned? A few words about that, please.
Well, the good news is it's not banned, and the better news is the production is going ahead, because I think the investors were, whatever said, quite excited by the fact that the reaction there was, so they know that when it comes out, whether the movie is good or not, there will be a crowd to see it. So I think this is what motivates producers and investors. So the production is going ahead. I know that much. And they probably aren't likely to go with a big name star. So I think having a big name, I mean, Sethupathi would have been wonderful, and he transformed and he really studied that role. But having a big name star, we saw the backlash and all that. So perhaps it might be better to cast the unknown and whatever that does to the production. But yeah, the production is going ahead. It just, well, I mean, I articulated my position in this article, but it was just the case that to criticize a movie before it's made, I think this is a new, after it's made, you can say, yes, it's too soft on Murali, it's too hard on Murali, it doesn't tell the true story, that's valid. But before it gets made, to say that people don't have a right to make this movie, it just seems very dubious. And I don't think that's defensible. And especially, and I think, I mean, I made these points, he's an off spinner. He's a world-class off spinner. This is what he is. He's not, and I made comparisons to, there are much more horrible characters who are having movies made about them. And this guy's an off spinner who perhaps may not have handled himself well in interviews, may have said the wrong thing, but he's an off spinner, and we were telling an off spinner story. So yeah, anyway, the good news is the movie is going ahead. My part is done. The script is, I'm doing a few edits now to kind of account for this, but the whole complexity was already there in the story. We were looking at what kind of Tamil was he? Was he a Tamil hero? Was he a Tamil traitor? What kind of bowler was he? Was he a great bowler? Was he, as people say, was there something dubious? So that's all there in the movie. So I think now we should all, I told the producers, you shouldn't have just, before the movie is made, done this. Just make the movie quietly, let it come out, and then let people judge it, I think. So yeah, that's where it's at the moment.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Harshana. I think
I might have another question if we have some time. Maybe Harshana can let us know if.
Please go ahead. Yeah.
I have a social question to ask to both of you. I know that, for example, like there is a class issue in literature. I think it's very hard to become a writer. I mean, a, a, um, a successful one if you don't get the right connections, and that creates some kind of class issues. So I would like to know how it is in Sri Lanka, especially because maybe the literature scene, as it is divided in three main areas, as you said, because of the languages. If it's the literature scene is a bit smaller than it is already in France, is it hard to get there? Is it really hard to get there? Are there class issues? Are there people who are kind of, out of this and will stay out of this? Certain kind of people, not individuals, of course.
I mean, again, I think let's leave it to the professor to properly answer this. But I mean, my feeling on the thing on the question is that obviously literature is a middle class endeavor. To have the luxury to sit back and write a story from your imagination, if you are struggling to put a roof over your heads and struggling financially, this is not an endeavor that you'll do. And perhaps if there was a welfare state where you could have working class people who devote time to writing, but it is a middle, I mean, especially English writing, it's a middle class endeavor, middle class and upper. It's a something that retired professionals would do, or some people who are in. So definitely, certainly, there's a class issue, and I think also we've just concluded, not just, I mean, it's been 10 years, we concluded a war for 2-3 decade war, and we've had a few stories about it, but what I was missing, and I think Harshana touched on the fact that a lot of Tamil literature is about conflict, but voices from inside the war. We've had nonfiction, we've had UN reports and all that, journalistic reports, but fiction written from, and I think Aruprakasam was one exception to that, where you had, but he's also very much a sort of not a voice coming from there. He's also from a privileged class, and as we all are. So I would like to have seen real stories coming out, and perhaps they will, and perhaps they are being written now. But yeah, a lot of I don't think the whole country is represented in terms of writers, and yeah, I don't see that changing really until either there's got to be a complete class upheaval, or maybe the literary marketplace has to change for that to happen. But at the moment, I would say, I mean, Harshana, you can let me know what you think on this, but yeah, that it is a middle class endeavor really.
Yeah, I mean, there's a very long answer, but I'll give the short answer. One is, of course, English writing in Sri Lanka is already privileged for the fact that the medium itself, the language itself, has a long colonial history, and those who can wield the English language very well tend to come from a particular background. And for a very long time, up to the 1980s, 90s, English literature was accused of being elitist. And when English writers tried to write about, say, the village, etc., it ended up being sort of fairly very stereotypical, very problematic. But I would say since the 1990s, that has changed. English itself, the access to English has changed, and different people have started writing, so it has become much more expanded. When it comes to something like Sinhala writing, again, class issues operate. I mean, the kind of literature that gets recognized, that gets awarded, that gets included in syllabuses is a certain kind of literary discourse in the country. So certain voices now, I think Captain Elmo actually did something practically to address this issue through Annasian Kadlagotu, the lowbrow, very explicitly lowbrow literary festival, which I was also privileged to be involved with in its first iteration, was to break down those. And one of the people who was featured Timran Kirti, who is actually a lawyer, and as I think Shehan rightfully said, the actual inside voices of the conflict, of people who encounter the conflict, that is writing in Tamil, but it's not making it, it's not being translated, it's not the voices that we hear. So it's like you said, it's the Arupragasams, the more sort of privileged voices that you hear. So there's certainly an access to two sides. One is access to publishing is limited to people coming from certain kinds of marginalized backgrounds. The other side is the literary discourse itself doesn't recognize those voices often enough. They are not brought in now. In India, maybe one difference is, for instance, the Dalit movement. Dalit writers have now come very much to prominence because academics, other people have India. We have not had any systematic sort of endeavor like that in Sri Lanka. So I'll leave it at that. I'm sure Uncle Elmo would like to share his views on this.
No, I have an entirely different way of looking at it. I only say, if you want to write, all you need is a book and a pen, and you can write. The entire thing is, you must not look at the destination. You must try to enjoy the journey, which is writing. And I tell everybody that, for God's sake, write. Start writing, not tomorrow, day after, but today. Then you will get some story. So that is part of your victory, to write a story. And then, if it is polished a little bit more, we do have a problem because we don't have that many publishers. So that is one of the negatives of writing. Can I get my book published? So that is a problem. But that should not stop you from writing. You should just write for the love of writing. And then if it is good, maybe it will get published. Otherwise, enjoy the journey. I enjoy the journey. When I sit on the computer and write an article, from the time I start writing, I feel so great. And next morning I wake up and start writing again. I definitely enjoy the journey of writing, but I don't know the destination.
Thank you so much for those great answers. Very, very interesting indeed. Thank you to the three of you.
Ivana, perhaps. Yeah, okay, somebody has a question?
No, I like to expand on Captain Elmo's story about finding humor in Sri Lanka. For example, when I was in the police, there was a bomb that went off. In the United States, they run away from the bomb. But in Sri Lanka, they run towards a bomb blast, and some guy will pick up one of these pieces of the bomb and say, "Sir, this is the problem." And he walks away, and we start laughing. Instead of running away, they run towards the bomb. And I know Elmo for the last 53 years when I met him in Mexico.
That's Godfrey, indeed.
Thank you.
That's Godfrey.
So, sir, are they running towards the bomb because we want to help the victims, or because we are just curious?
Very curious, that's why.
Oh, curious is a kind word. Maybe there's a more accurate one, but okay.
Ivana, then perhaps we can bring there are, I think, zillions of conversations to happen here, and there are actually questions that I shared with Elmo and Shehan earlier, which we haven't got to, but I think in the interest of time, we'll probably bring this to a conclusion now. So thank you very much again to the Alliance Française for taking this initiative, because one thing, I do appreciate is they are also limited in Sri Lanka. And I think the more we have them, the better literature we will have, the better writers we will produce, because young people need to see these kinds of discussions. So thank you for organizing this, and thank you for inviting all of us. And thank you, Shehan and Captain Elmo, for kindly agreeing to give up your Sunday evening for this discussion. So I think we've had a fairly interesting discussion, so we can bring it to a conclusion then.
I would say one thing. I am very grateful to the Alliance for inviting me, my good friend Vijay Dasa, and I am delighted to have worked with Harshana and Shehan. And this kind of thing at least keeps literature alive at a time when things are all kind of corona-fied, right? That's the word I can use. So this kind of thing is very, very nice. I'm very grateful. Only thing that was different was Shehan's beard. I didn't realize it was white till I saw him, right? Thank you, Shehan. Thank you very much. And a wonderful time with you and Harshana.
Likewise. Thank you very much. Thank you for having us. And yes, it was a fun chat. And yeah, the one good thing about Corona is now no excuse for not reading all the unread books on your shelf. We all live in houses full of unread books, so I think that's at least one positive. But yeah, thank you to the Alliance Française. Thank you, Ivana and Frederick and Harshana. And yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Shehan. Thank you, Captain Elmo. Thank you, Harshana, for spending your time with us and joining in this event. You all made this event very interesting and very special. Thank you. It's an honor to have all of you here at this moment. I'm really grateful and thank you. And I'm really hoping that we can have an actual event, not online, maybe next year. And I'm really hoping to see you all. And thank you for all the participants for joining us for this event. And thank you so much. Frederick?
Yes, thank you so much. I have nothing to add because it was really, really nice, and your answers, your exchanges were fascinating. It's very, very pleasant to have people of such intellectual level around and to have them exchange. It's very nice. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, and see you very soon. Goodbye.
Thank you, everybody, and good night then.
Thank you. Good night. Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Godfrey, you're online, didn't you?